Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum in my Spirit Day tie.
Sorry, I stepped on your line.
It's all right. Who are you?
I'm Ann Northrup.
Oh, welcome to the show.
Evidently, I have no spirit because I'm not wearing purple.
Oh, well, but we got a lot of news for you.
We do.
New Jersey's same-sex marriage case is put on a fast track by the state's high court.
Lickety-split. Michigan, maybe not marriage. You may know the answer to this before we do because they're deciding maybe today, Wednesday, the day we're taping, but we'll catch up with it next week.
A North Carolina registrar has issued marriage licenses to same-sex couples, we'll show you this, but says he can't sign them until the state approves, and it's not gonna.
Illinois' marriage equality supporters are preparing for a march on the Capitol, Springfield, on October 22nd.
A story that is too sad for words. The father of a gay teen suicide was himself killed in an accident as he walked across the country to draw attention to the plight of LGBT youth.
Very terrible. Finally, after many years of pleading, the United States Postal Service has announced that it will issue a stamp honoring Harvey Milk.
The U.S. Olympic Committee criticizes the anti-gay Russian law while maintaining it is not their place to try to change it, and they seek guidance from the IOC on the extent to which athletes will be able to express their dissent at the Olympics.
And they did take an action, which we'll tell you about.
Yes.
Meanwhile, here in New York, our friend, the Russian conductor and Vladimir Putin's friend, Valery Gergiev, was followed to Carnegie Hall by Ann and Andy and a bunch of our Queer Nation friends who went inside and heckled just before the concert. We'll show you some aftermath of that.
Moldova has repealed its Russian-style anti-gay law to earn membership in the European Union.
The momentum is moving our way. But meanwhile, Guido Barilla has met with gay leaders, but they're still boycotting his pasta.
And I will give you my review of the other production of Romeo and Juliet in New York, starring Daphne Rubin-Vega, among others. But we start with all these marriage cases, which, as Ann pointed out last week, are taking off like a rocket ship.
Now, what I said was that the possible Supreme Court discussion of marriage is moving like a rocket ship towards D.C., but these are actions in the states.
And the first one is what's happening in New Jersey. The judge in the New Jersey same-sex marriage case has refused to grant a stay of her order that the couples be able to marry on October 21st. By the time you see this, this may have been resolved. So Governor Christie appealed that stay to a higher court, calls the state argument about harm abstract, and the harm to the plaintiffs or she called the state's arguments abstract.
She said there would be, by
and the harm to the plaintiffs would be concrete in terms of not being able to access their federal benefits. That's the issue. That's the big issue here. I mean, in New
that's why she turned down the stay.
Because in New Jersey, they can have civil unions and they can get certain kinds of state benefits that are supposed to parallel. But if they can't get married, they can't get their federal benefits.
Right.
So they need to get married.
So the case is in court. The lower court judge has said they should be allowed to marry, and they should be allowed to marry on October 21st, and she's not staying that decision while the governor appeals her order. Meanwhile, the governor turned to the highest court, the Supreme Court of the state, to say, don't even bother with the appeals court, just skip over them and you take it and decide this. And our side agreed and said, yes, let's have an expedited hearing on this. And the state Supreme Court has now agreed to take the case over the appeals court and has set out a schedule for arguments, for briefs going back and forth, and for oral arguments in January. And they agreed to take up the question of whether there should be a stay in the meantime. Now, they were going to hear that this week and decide whether to issue the stay. So, again, this may be something that the answer to before we do, but we will report on it next
Not
week.
to get too far ahead of it, but this is a case where they could say the harm is immediate and concrete, as the judge said, and not, keeping a stay there. And I think they might let them get married. Now, the gutless legislators.
Well, wait a second. The other grounds on the stay is whether or not the plaintiffs or either side has a likelihood of winning at the Supreme Court. And the lower court judge said that our side has the biggest chance of winning, and therefore to issue a stay of her order would impose more harm.
That's why that's how stays are supposed to work. Now, the legislature is gutless, and they don't have enough votes to override the Governor Christie's veto here. And no, they don't yet. Now, but it's one of those cases, and I think the same is true in a lot of these other states, not all, but legislators would rather pass the buck and not take a hard vote. And that's what they say, oh, you're going to get it anyway. Why should I stick my neck out for you? That's what I think is happening in these cases.
Possibly, but there are a lot of factors here, and the gubernatorial election in the first week of November plays into this too, and that's why Christie is trying to put it off till after then so he can get reelected before he has to give in to the fact that same-sex marriage will take place.
Sadly, one of the things we learn is that despite the fact that he's taken this bigoted stance, Christie, his poll numbers are sky high. And so people, it's just not.
Everybody loves a bully.
Well, and Spirit Day is against bullies.
Well, let's get to a nicer. Well, I think we're going to win in the end in New Jersey, so that's okay. But it's
I think
really
we're going to win everywhere.
I agree with that. But meanwhile, we have to put up with listening to Chris Christie. But North Carolina has an interesting development. A county registrar there in Buncombe County, which is Asheville, North Carolina, which is an historically liberal island in the middle of North Carolina.
Home of the Brevard Music School.
And many other things. I've been there too. But and a lot of hippie kinds of things in Asheville. Anyway, the registrar there said that he thinks same-sex marriage should be legal. He thinks it's discrimination, especially after he heard the Attorney General of the state say that he supports same-sex marriage.
Roy Cooper.
So what the local registrar said is, all right, all these couples are coming in. They're asking for marriage licenses, same-sex couples. I am actually going to let them fill out the applications, which other county clerks around the South are not letting people do. They're just saying, no, you're not allowed. Well, they're being nicer about it. We've shown them being nicer about it. But they've said, no, we can't let you apply. He's saying, I will let you apply. I will let you go through the process. I can't sign your applications to accept them because I'm not allowed to, but I will take them, and then if the Attorney General decides it's okay, then I will sign them.
But unlike some other Attorney Generals, this one says, no, the law is the law in North Carolina, where they did just pass a constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage, one of the last states to do so.
Yeah. So the Attorney General is on our side, but he's not going to not enforce the law. Well, it's not entirely unlike other jurisdictions where he says, I don't like the law, I will fight the law, but I'm not going to stop enforcing it. Not unlike the Justice Department with DOMA. So we have told you about the Campaign for Southern Equality and how they're doing actions around the South in very moving ways. And there is coverage of what happened in North Carolina, in Asheville, when couples who lined up by the scores at this office to apply for marriage licenses, when they encountered the registrar of the local county in North Carolina and asked for marriage licenses. So what you'll first see is a bunch of them in a church the night before preparing for this action, and then the scene in the office.
First time since we launched the We Do campaign, and for our knowledge, for the first time in the South, the marriage license office is going to accept the applications of LGBT couples who are applying this morning. Yeah. Today is making sure those licenses get sent off from here to Raleigh with as much love and hope about what's possible as we can muster.
Well, I know where they are.
Good morning.
Good morning.
How are y'all doing this morning?
Good. Good.
What can we do for y'all today?
We're here to apply for a marriage license.
It seems that y'all qualify for every reason under the law except for your sexual orientation, and we think there are some real constitutional questions that are raised in that. I took an oath to uphold the state of North Carolina's Constitution. I also took an oath to uphold the United States Constitution, and the United States Constitution demands equal rights for all people, and so that's what we're going to ask the Attorney General to look over for us. So my hope is that he will grant me permission to grant y'all this license. I'm very proud of y'all for coming in here, and thank y'all for your courage, and thank you for consistently asking me for marriage licenses, and hopefully it won't be long until I can turn this back around to you.
And Drew, we want to thank you for your courage in standing up and doing the right thing. One of the reasons that we're here is to be a visible face for this movement, to show the people of North Carolina that we're not very scary. And we have confidence that as Christians and as Americans, eventually everybody will do the right thing.
I'd just like to say thank you so much for not only giving us hope, but for how many hundreds of couples across both the South and the United States that are looking for the same right, and for youth and their families, you know, to have hope that this can happen for all of us. So thank you so much for doing this for us.
Definitely.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet y'all.
Nice to meet you, too.
Pleasure to meet you again.
Thank you.
What was going on with all that clapping was all the happy couples walking out with their unsigned licenses.
Well, one thing that struck me about that was at the beginning where they have the meeting in the church, and it just immediately took me back to the civil rights movement and all the organizing that took place in churches as the basis for putting together actions, organizing the bus boycotts, organizing the marches.
Hey, we had a lot of gay meetings in churches in the old days, I remember. Yeah.
Well, it's wherever you meet, it is important to have those meetings to organize people, to get together, to plan what to do and why to do it and how to think about it and how to talk about it. And it's very moving to see that. And if you want to see the civil rights model, get a copy of the brilliant series, Eyes on the Prize, And you'll see it all right in front of you, and it's a fantastic model for what we can and should be doing.
So congratulations to our brothers and sisters in North Carolina.
And
They're
you can
moving
learn
along.
more about that whole campaign by going to southernequality.org. And you'll find all about the campaign for Southern Equality, which is, you know, we think, I have to say that after the DOMA Section 3 was overturned by the Supreme Court in June, you sort of had a sense of, we've reached at least a big milestone. But we have to remember it's still only legal in 13 states and the District of Columbia.
Well, the Supreme Court held back on that.
And we have a long way to go in making it legal nationally, and there's a lot of work going on.
And there are lots of things happening. We learned that Hawaii may vote on same-sex marriage by the end of the year. They've also got a case there.
In Springfield, Illinois, next week, Tuesday, October 22nd, there will be a big march and rally promoting the legalization of same-sex marriage in Illinois.
Well, they have to because they're pushing for the vote there before the end of the year.
Well, they're starting what's called the veto session of the legislature. Will they bring it up there? Will they wait and bring it up after the first of the year? There are all sorts of political considerations, but people are tired of waiting. And there are court cases there, too, going on simultaneously. But if you are going to be anywhere near Springfield, Illinois next week and want to know about this or participate, you can go to the website marchonspringfield.org for information about that.
It's going to be from 1 o'clock till 2:30 p.m. Governor Pat Quinn's going to be there. Lots of religious and union leaders, and our old friend Andy Thayer will be speaking there. And they're going to have a 1-hour Rock the March concert at the state capitol there as well beforehand.
We also are watching Michigan because, as we've told you for months now, there's a judge there who decided to expand a case about same-sex couples adopting into a marriage case. And the word is he may decide that today.
Yes.
Why are we here? All this stuff's happening today. We should have waited till tonight.
We should have. And people were also lined up to get married right away if they couldn't get the stay right away. Don't forget that happened in Iowa when that case first came out. One or two couples were able to get married before the stay was reimposed, and they were still married.
So Equality Michigan has put together a list of clerks who are ready to give licenses, even though if this judge decides to make same-sex marriage legal, it's not likely to stand very long in the state. Eventually,
in New Mexico, on October 23rd, there's a hearing by the state Supreme Court on their marriage case. In Virginia, there's a hearing on October 29th. The governor wants the case dismissed. The Lambda Legal and ACLU want class certification.
And as all this is going on, we have known that in Oregon, activists there were working on gathering signatures for a referendum next year to repeal the state's constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage and legalize same-sex marriage. But two couples walked into marriage license bureaus this week, applied for marriage licenses, were turned down, and filed suit. So now there is a lawsuit in Oregon, too, along with the attempt to take a vote.
And that's in federal court. And Oregon has full domestic partnerships, but they have this law against same-sex marriage. In North Dakota, they now have a gay married couples tax form. They actually have a little worksheet for gay couples about how to figure their taxes. Well,
look, we have talked about the complications of how you have to fill out a real federal form, a dummy federal form, a real tax form.
Why
based
are
on
they
the
making it
dummy
easier
federal
on homosexual couples? Where's the right wing when you need them?
Exactly.
Hello.
The people who brought you Prop 8 in California and who are never letting go on any of this stuff have gone back to court to again fight the publication of the names of their donors.
The names are already online.
That's what the court said to them. What are you talking about? The names are already up there. And they said, no, we want you to take them down because we don't want them public because we may do future things and these people are under threat.
These gays, you know, you don't know what they're going to do. of course, if you've been through the last 2 weeks and several months in this country with what the Republicans were doing in Washington, they're capable of anything.
I feel
absolutely anything.
I fear the
Traitors.
future campaigns of the Prop 8 people.
Then there's Maggie Gallagher. She was with the National Organization for Marriage. She's still with them. She made this acknowledgement. It is clear that the courts are going to shut down the marriage debate and impose gay marriage uniformity. She wants her followers to keep fighting so that these decisions are more like Roe v. Wade and not like Brown v. Board of Education, meaning she doesn't want the decision to become accepted.
Well,
But it is being accepted by the country.
Florida Representative Dennis Baxley is doing his best to slow us down. He gave some statement equating kids who have two mommies with kids who have to grow up in families riddled with violence, drug abuse, and alcoholism.
Isn't
Thank
that
you.
nice? Well, we got some good news. We got a picture of him. Olympic diver Greg Louganis, 53, married his partner, who's a paralegal, Johnny Chaillot, who's 52. This was Saturday in Malibu, and they met on Match.com in 2012. I'm not doing an ad for them. I'm just saying. Remember, we had to fight with Match.com to even get gays on there.
No, was it Match.com or eHarmony?
Oh, you're right.
or,
You're
yeah.
right. You're right. You're right. Sorry, Match.
But a couple that has been together a little longer, 40 plus years, Dava Weinstein and Dorothy Calvani,
yes.
who started the Bees Fund at Stonewall, named after the grandmother of one of them, or mother or aunt or something. They're longtime philanthropists and activists in the community, and they have lived together in a rent-stabilized apartment in New York. They're married now. And so one of them, whose name the apartment was originally in, wanted to add her wife to the lease.
As she is legally able to do.
Even before they were married, she was legally
No.
able to do.
No.
Yes, if they were domestic partners
No.
or...
No. Domestic, let me explain. They never had to put domestic partners on the lease. They did have to give you the apartment if the other one died under the decision of the court. I went to try to do this with my landlord.
I went to try to do it with mine.
And they said no. They didn't have to say yes to you. They were nice to you. They did not have to say nice to you.
Well, they had to acknowledge the relationship in some way.
They have to let them in the place.
Yes.
But they don't have to put them on the lease because their attitude is, you might leave,
Yes.
and I don't want to give the apartment to the other person if I don't have to. And only under the marriage law do they have to if you're married.
To be continued.
Okay.
But meanwhile, the landlord, even though they are married, said no.
He's wasting a lot of legal funds if he's doing that. So Lambda Legal is defending them.
Sure, because this is impact
easy.
litigation.
And there should be damages if the landlord's going to be so stupid and obstreperous.
Oh, and Greg Louganis is not the only Olympian who married. U.S. soccer star Abby Wambach announced that she married her longtime partner and teammate Sarah Huffman on
In Hawaii.
but the marriage is not legal there, so maybe they've gotten it legal
And,
somewhere else.
Nevada, we've got a Ninth Circuit challenge to the ban on same-sex marriage.
Governor Jerry Brown of California has signed a law guaranteeing insurance coverage for fertility treatments for unmarried, opposite sex, and same-sex couples who are married or not married.
Okay.
And in other news,
All right. Where are we?
let's see. Well, let's start with this very sad story. 15-year-old Jaden Bell had been bullied at school in Oregon for a long time, and he ended up killing himself. And his father was just distraught, absolutely destroyed by this.
So he went on what he called a walk for change in honor of his son, who was going to go from Oregon to New York. And he was, speaking at churches and at schools and things about this. He just couldn't rest. He would sit up nights saying, "I got to do something. I got to do something." So my son didn't die in vain, and that's what he was doing. And he was walking along the shoulder of US 40 in Cheyenne, Colorado, in eastern Colorado there, when a truck hit him. The driver was cited for careless driving. He was killed. His goal
Joe was killed, not the
Yes,
truck driver.
yeah.
That's Joe on the right and his late son Jaden on the left.
His goal was to help gay kids in danger of suicide.
The truck driver evidently fell asleep. which I'm not excusing, I'm just saying it was
Yeah.
a horrible, horrible, tragic accident.
Right, and a sad story all around.
Very
Was doing
sad.
great work. So we all have to pick up his work.
Yes, that would be nice. Another thing that California Governor Jerry Brown has signed is a bill simplifying name and gender changes for transgender people on birth certificates. They no longer have to go to court. It's a much simpler system now.
We have some happier news about students. In Illinois, in Waukegan, we have a picture of them. 2 out gay students were voted homecoming king and queen. They are Eric Irizarry and Ariana Rife at Waukegan there, and that's a breakthrough.
We also told you last week about Ray Ramsey being elected homecoming king at Concord High School in Concord, New Hampshire.
If we
and
could
I
switch
think
the
we
pictures.
have, there he
There's
is.
Ray
there.
Ramsey.
A big headline, wins throne. Congratulations, Ray.
And yeah.
Interesting decision in Louisville, Kentucky. The Human Relations Commission there has issued an opinion saying that an out gay cop, Kyle Nave, had been harassed and fired because he was gay. And there was a deputy chief of police there who was just horrid to him, called him names, bullied him, harassed him, did awful, just relentless against him, and finally fired him. Ray sued. He is suing for damages, and meanwhile, the commission has now issued a ruling saying that, finding saying that he was illegally harassed. And Louisville, as we have reported in some time past, has a non-discrimination law.
Since 1999.
Well, there you go.
This cop didn't know they had one, but he found out. And it's good that I mean, after they sort of figured out he was gay and all, and coming out and all this stuff, they gave him 57 citations, departmental. He'd never had one before this.
Yeah.
No, it's just.
No, he had a great record,
disgraceful.
and he was just hounded. But this is why we need employment and other non-discrimination laws. You may remember the gay couple who were attacked on 8th Avenue outside Madison Square Garden.
Yes.
Some months ago. They finally arrested one guy.
They had him on camera.
Yes, and they're hoping that he will give up some of his friends under questioning.
Be a rat.
Yeah.
We hope he'll be a rat.
We'll see.
All right.
Speaking of fighting on another basis, we've told you about Orlando Cruz, the first out gay boxer, who was fighting this last weekend for the
Title fight.
World Featherweight title. He was knocked out in the 7th round, unfortunately. But he was wearing trunks, rainbow trunks, sort of done in the style of the Puerto Rican flag, and pink gloves for breast cancer. But the crowd was yelling puto at him, fag in Spanish.
Sounds like a wrestling match.
I think he's a very, very brave guy who
very proud of himself.
put up with a lot.
But are we proud of ourselves? The researchers from Ohio State and Boston University said public opinion surveys underreport LGBT identity and underreport anti-gay sentiments, even in anonymous surveys. So they designed a study where answers could not be connected to respondents and compared them to conventional surveys. They called it a veiled method, and they found a lot more anti-gay bigotry and a lot more gay people.
Well, and particularly what they found was that there was a lot of underreported same-sex sexual activity, not just identity, but actual behavior, and that was, I would say,
as we've always said.
Yes, exactly. Although some studies have found, Kinsey studies found an enormous amount of same-sex sexual activity that people just basically don't want to deal with.
It's a very densely populated spectrum from gay to straight. But again, in our society, very few people identify as the bisexuals that they are.
Right. Also, they found a lot of the unreported anti-gay feeling was directed particularly towards bosses. People do not like having gay bosses.
Oh, you know, I mean, this is something women bosses
Power
have been going through for a
differentials.
long time.
Absolutely. And another study this week by the Williams Institute at the UCLA Law School looked at various census reports and found that over 1 million African American people in the United States are self-identified as LGBT. That constitutes about 3.7% of the African American population. Now, what the Williams Institute has always said in issuing these numbers is that this is about people who are out. This is not to be taken as a number of the people who are LGBT, which, of course, we would say is like 90%, but with some degree of possibility for same-sex attraction.
Now, this will be quoted on every right-wing
Be my
website
guest. Be
in
my
the
guest.
world.
Deny it if you will.
Well, we do
But 3.7% are publicly identified, and a third of African American same-sex couples, primarily living in the South, are raising children.
Speaking of African Americans, on National Coming Out Day, October 11th, I didn't have a chance to tell anybody, but I am gay. President Obama tweeted, "Today is a day to celebrate being who you are."
Okay.
Thank you, Barack.
In Ohio, a state representative there has proposed adding sexual orientation, gender identity, and disability to their hate crimes law.
In Delta Township, Michigan, they shelved an anti-discrimination ordinance for 2 weeks after it was challenged by the religious right that is pushing for a Christian government. It comes up October 21st.
We are a very divided country.
Yes, we are.
Liz Cheney is trying to stop the Tea Party types in Wyoming from running an ad that she calls a dishonest smear that she supports gay marriage. No, I don't. And that's a dishonest smear, just to claim that I would support my sister's lesbian marriage.
Well, it's not a dishonest smear to say that U.S. Senator John Barrasso of Wyoming and Representative Adrian Smith of Nebraska, a Tea Partier, they're both anti-gay, are homosexual. But there's been stuff about them for years.
Yes, if you Google John Barrasso gay, you get stuff
And Adrian
from
Smith
5
gay.
years ago.
But now Mike Rogers has certified it, and Mike is the pope of this because he's never wrong.
Yeah. Well, out gay basketball center Jason Collins is still unsigned at the beginning of the basketball season.
They're saying it's not because he's out gay, but because he's
older,
too expensive.
and he's older, too expensive, and not that great. But what happens in a lot of these cases is as you get further along in the season, a lot of people get picked up later on when teams have someone who's injured or need to fulfill a particular need.
In California, the out California Speaker of the Assembly, John A. Perez, is now running for state comptroller. And they dredged up some story of some guy he dated years ago and tried to link him to some scandal. It's a phony story.
Ridiculous.
But so he may be he's maybe a statewide official someday.
But another California politician, the late Harvey Milk, will be honored by the United States Postal Service with a stamp next year, if anyone is still using stamps next year.
I still use
I use
stamps.
them too, but some don't.
All right. First, in Virginia, first of all, did you know that this is Ex-Gay Awareness Month?
Yes, I did.
I thought it was LGBT History Month. Anyway, there's a group called Voice of the Voiceless that went undercover to see if Virginia's public universities would make referrals to ex-gay counseling. They wouldn't, even in Virginia.
Mm-hmm. But the LGBTQ alumni group of Clemson University in South Carolina is offering a scholarship, a small one, $500 for a gay supportive student. But this is sort of unprecedented at Clemson, so that's a nice thing.
I told you that here in New York, Senator Brad Hoylman, out gay senator, state senator, was trying to get a plaque put up on Stonewall. It's hard to believe there's not a plaque up on the Stonewall, but this is now going through a public process through the community board, but the Landmarks Committee didn't want to touch the text because it's too controversial, so they referred it to social services. You may weigh in with the community board there from wherever you are around the country if you want to be involved with this.
Well, speaking of history and going a little farther back, you may remember Senator Joe McCarthy.
Bad guy.
I'm old
and
enough
homosexual.
to remember him. Well, closeted. But he was, of course, famous for leading witch hunts against supposed lists of homosexuals in the State Department, et cetera, et
And
cetera.
commies.
Well, you may also remember the Alan Drury book, Advise and Consent, which was a slightly fictionalized portrait of a true story of a senator who was blackmailed and who ended up killing himself. Well, here's the true story. The senator was a Senator Lester Hunt, and he...
From where?
I actually
Okay,
didn't write
it's all
that
right.
down. But his son Buddy Hunt, was arrested for soliciting sex from an undercover cop. And when that happened, Senator Joe McCarthy and 2 other senators tried to blackmail Lester Hunt about this story so that they could take control of the Senate.
Wow.
And Lester Hunt ended up killing himself rather than be subject to this blackmail from Joe McCarthy. Well, next week in D.C., the Mattachine Society, who knew they even still existed, is holding a public mock trial of Senator McCarthy and these other 2 senators to bring this story to light.
Well, there's no statute of limitations on murder. Is it
Well,
like
he's
a murder?
dead.
Well, I know, but I mean, you know. I mean, couldn't we do it in
This was 1954 that Lester Hunt killed himself. That's
understand.
60 years ago. Well,
and
let's
then
start
Joe-
with
and
the
then
mock trial.
Joe drank himself to death, didn't he?
Yes, I believe so. So there's a new book out about all this that is sort of the occasion for all this, called Dying for the Sins of Joe McCarthy, the Suicide of Wyoming Senator Lester Hunt, by a guy named Roger McDaniel. So the Mattachine Society is staging this mock trial next Wednesday, the 23rd, in D.C. at 7:30 p.m. at All Souls Church at 1500 Harvard Street Northwest at 16th
Sounds
Harvard and
fascinating.
16th. I wish I could be there. Senator Alan Simpson of Wyoming, whose father was also a senator and governor and a good friend of Lester Hunt's. Alan Simpson is showing up to speak about all this before the mock trial.
Well,
I think it's going to be a fantastic event.
As long as we're talking about history, I woke up in the middle of the night, started watching that movie about Muhammad Ali on trial for draft dodging, and they go behind the scenes. It's a great movie. It's on HBO, and the key justice is. What's his name? Oh, God. No, I'm blocking his name. Not Learned Hand, Justice Harlan.
Yes.
Harlan, right?
Yeah.
He's the key. He switches on the case, and it becomes a unanimous decision, letting Ali off the hook. So I looked into him. His grandfather had been on the Supreme Court and was the dissenter in Plessy versus Ferguson, saying blacks are equal. Blah, blah, blah. And then I read more about him. But his grandfather also said, but not the Chinese. He said that's a different race. That's a different thing entirely. So we are growing in such leaps and bounds here and trying to figure everything out.
Or inch by inch.
Yeah.
And as long as we're mentioning history, we should mourn the death of Elmer
Lockins.
of
We have
Gus
a
and
picture. We have a
Elmer.
picture of them. Gus and Elmer are a couple together for like 67 years.
Yep.
They were these guys in their 80s, well into their 80s, were doing marriage demonstrations. They were always out there. They finally did get married. Gus died a couple of last year, I think it was, and now Elmer has gone as well at the age of, I think, 97.
And we must report that Carl Shortino of Massachusetts, who was trying to be the Democratic nominee to fill Ed Markey's congressional seat, lost his race, came in third out of 6 or 7 candidates.
But a good progressive, Catherine Clark, did win the race.
And she was a state senator representative, and Carl may be a candidate for her seat.
Yeah.
So.
And let's see. In Tahoma High School in Mapleville, Washington, to protest a student allowed to wear a rainbow flag, 2 students wore Confederate flags and were suspended because that violates school policy.
Because it's hate speech.
Yes, it is.
And provocative.
Yeah, well, that's why they said they did it. Let's see. In San Diego, everybody read about Bob Filner, the mayor who resigned, but During his campaign for mayor, he apparently coordinated with an anti-gay campaign against his rival, out-gay Carl DeMeo, through a front group called Conservatives for Gay Rights Supporting Carl DeMeo, which made robocalls to highlight DeMeo's homosexuality to conservative voters. The group got fined $7,500 by the San Diego Ethics Commission. We don't have an ethics commission here.
Well, in that race, Carl DeMeo was the conservative and Filner was the liberal.
Yeah, I know.
Look where that got us.
Yeah, well.
All right, let's move to abroad.
Okay.
To international news. Well, there's a lot of Russia stuff, but let's run through some other stuff first just to do it. In Jamaica, horrible stories of the last few months of gay men being pursued by mobs, beaten, killed. One mob chased down 4 gay men and firebombed their house. These guys were friends of that transgender teenager who was murdered after a party a couple of months ago. Awful, horrible stories. We must start focusing more on Jamaica.
Better news from Moldova. As we reported, Moldova officially dropped its Russian-style ban on the promotion of homosexuality to minors, that's M-I-N-O-R-S, as it tries to get into the European Union. Moldova is between the Ukraine and Romania. Right-wing Orthodox protested this, and but the predicted pullback would lead to they said that it would lead to same-sex marriage, which I haven't heard that they're going to do there.
Cops in Egypt arrested 14 men and the manager and staff of a sauna, which may or may not have been a gay club. They charged homosexual behavior was taking place. They also said something about drugs and pills, although the thinking is it was probably steroids and it was sort of a workout.
But the prosecutors have ordered that the men be held for 4 days and given intensive tests to determine if they engaged in indecent acts.
The
anal probe.
Yes, exactly. In Iran, the Iran guards invaded a gay party of 80 people in a suburban house. They pepper sprayed them, they beat them, they stole all their personal information off their phones.
We don't know what's happened to these guys.
17 of them were arrested and beaten in jail. It's just brutal. But better news from Montenegro, where the president held a meeting with LGBT activists and promised that their first Pride Parade would be a safe event on October 20th.
Yep, this is a nation of 625,000 in the Balkans. In Argentina, the government granted 6-year-old transgender girl
Lulu
an ID that corresponds with her gender identity. She was born a biological male, but dressed as a girl since she could talk. The first time a minor has used the new law there, doesn't require a judge or a doctor, and it's the only country that does so. Argentina.
And Guido Barilla?
Yes. He met with LGBT and civil rights groups after his horrible anti-gay statements. But Franco Grillini, the former president of RC Gay, one of the advocacy groups there, said, "We're happy for what Mr. Barilla said today, but we cannot say that peace has come. We are still waiting for real pro-gay policies. I'm glad that people are holding out for something real." You know,
well, Guido is concerned about the U.S. market for his pasta, so he's backpedaling.
But I'm glad
crazy.
that they're holding firm. I like what Malala, the Pakistani girl who got shot in the head, you know, when she met with Obama, she brought up to him, you know, you're really breeding terrorism with your drone strikes. She used the opportunity not to say, "Oh, I'm meeting with the president." Da, da, da. You got to speak truth to power.
Exactly. Well, speaking of which, Russia.
Yes.
Trying to speak truth to power were just about 15 demonstrators in St. Petersburg who were trying to just hold a peaceful little demonstration. Hundreds of right-wing religious fanatics showed up. The violence started when one of them on the right tried to grab a rainbow flag away from one of the 15 LGBT demonstrators. We have more pictures.
Yeah.
Fights broke out. There were 67 arrests. There you see some of the religious people. That's one of the right-wing thugs being arrested. All 15 of the LGBT demonstrators were arrested. There's a brave couple who are kissing as they're being arrested. And the helpful Russian police, the LGBT activists were trying to celebrate International Coming Out Day with just a nice little gathering in a park, but no, the thugs show up in great numbers.
Okay.
The U.S. State Department has announced that it will review Fred Karger's charge that Brian Brown of the National Organization for Marriage violated the U.S. Logan Act by working with a foreign government against U.S. interests. I don't know how far we'll get with that, but it's nice that the State Department at least is officially taking that complaint.
Let's talk about the U.S. Olympic Committee. They voted Friday to add explicitly sexual orientation to its non-discrimination policy, but they also want clarity from the International Olympic Committee on what constitutes a violation of Rule 50, which bans demonstration of religious or racial propaganda from any Olympic sites, venues, or other areas. They don't have clarity on that.
Well, what the USOC did say was that they were encouraging U.S. athletes to speak out before the games while they're waiting for clarification about what they can do at the games. They applauded Bodie Miller, the skier's statements against the Russian law, and they are becoming more forthright about this. Now, there are those who say they still are not going far enough, but they are certainly going farther than a lot of others.
Now that we have them over a barrel, can we get back to the term gay Olympics? They made us stop that. They went to court over that.
They went to Congress, too. They went to court because Congress had given them exclusive use of the term Olympics.
Yeah.
And the court upheld that.
The guy from the USOC, Blackman, still says, we do not think it is our role to advocate for a change in the Russian law. Don't stay on the sidelines. But he says, but that does not mean we support the law. We do not.
Right.
A Paralympic gold medalist, Lee Pearson, an out gay from Britain, vowed to protest versus anti-gay laws at Sochi. Now, he's in dressage. I mean, he's not going to be competing there, but he says he's going to go.
Yes, because that would be Summer Olympics.
But even if it means he could be put in prison, he says.
We'll see what Johnny Weir does. Baryshnikov, Mikhail Baryshnikov, the dancer, issued a statement against the anti-gay laws. He, of course, is originally Russian. And he is supporting the No More Fear Foundation, which helps emigres from Russia who come here needing everything. So he's standing up for them. The New York State Comptroller, DiNapoli, was asked by State Senator Danny O'Donnell, Assembly member.
Yes, Assembly member.
Sorry.
And a longtime viewer of the show.
Hi, Danny. The Comptroller was asked by Danny. The Comptroller controls the state pension funds and how they're invested. And so what he asked was that DiNapoli look at disinvesting from Russian-connected companies.
Divestment. Divestment.
What did I
call
say?
It. You said disinvesting.
Okay.
That's all right.
Sorry. And DiNapoli wrote him a letter and said, well, actually, we're only allowed to make decisions based on economic concerns, not political concerns, but we're allowed to examine companies that we invest in and whether their actions are harming the company value and reputation or enabling egregious practices abroad.
A backdoor way of divestment.
And is that the way they looked at it with South Africa and
apartheid?
Well,
I think we passed laws about the McBride principles about Northern Ireland and about divestment in South Africa. They would pass a separate law and say you can't invest, we can't invest in those places. That's how those divestment movements worked.
Okay. Well, we have told you about our little trip to the Metropolitan Opera to protest Russian prominent conductor Valery Gergiev, who is very, very close to Putin.
Yes, we have both come off the sidelines in terms of our neutrality on this issue and are participating in these demonstrations. We're for gay rights.
Andy and I have created a new category called activist journalists. Self-defined.
All right, we've always been.
We have, and we like to think our openness about it and our attempts at honesty cover us on that. Anyway, we went after Gergiev at the Met. They were doing Tchaikovsky opera.
Now, Gergiev is not just a Putin friend, but when Pussy Riot was arrested, he condemned them and said, yes, lock them up.
And he has refused to say anything against the anti-gay laws, of
He
course.
did give one small statement this week saying, I don't discriminate against anybody.
But he's refused all other interviews, and the only way he said that was because someone caught him at a cocktail
And then he said,
party.
I'm not going to talk about it anymore because you can't win with these people.
I have no time for anything but music. So he was
One of my hexes says he's a terrific conductor, by the way.
Oh, that's not true. People hate him. He gets bad reviews.
Oh, no, this was Brad knowing him for
Well,
years. and
I'm
everything.
sure there are mixed opinions. Anyway, he has his own little orchestra financed by the Russian government, the Mariinsky Orchestra, and they were performing at Carnegie Hall. Russian programs. The Stravinsky the first night, whose Rite
Gay.
of Spring, of course, was protested when it opened at the Paris Opera 100 years ago.
Stravinsky, gay.
Yeah, okay, I got you. So we went to, again, tell Gergiev that we want him to tell his pal Putin to get rid of these laws and start treating LGBT people in Russia nicely. And so we did the same thing. We went in front of Carnegie Hall with our big Support Russian Gays rainbow banner, 60 feet long.
Made by Gilbert Baker.
Beautiful. And a few people went inside, and as Gergiev appeared and was about to start the concert, had not started it yet, one got up and started yelling at him what we'd yelled at the Metropolitan Opera, Gergiev, your silence is killing Russian gays. He got hauled off, so the second person gets up and he starts yelling and he gets hauled off.
We're talking about journalist activist Duncan Osborne and John Weir, not Johnny Weir, but John Weir.
John Weir. And one person inside doing support, Ken Kidd, and another person inside doing support, and a lawyer who talked the gay cops out of arresting them. Gay cops who didn't want to arrest them because they didn't do anything wrong.
Carnegie Hall wanted them arrested.
Absolutely.
And the lawyer said they paid for their tickets. They're not disrupting the concert.
Right.
And
when you asked them to leave,
they're
they
leaving.
left. So
What's
what do
the
you want them
crime?
arrested for?
I mean,
and one of the Carnegie Hall guys says, he was pointing at Gergiev.
they're terrible over there.
They are. So here is a little aftermath of Duncan and Ken Kidd talking to the press, including Andy Hub, with Ann Northrop in the background, and here's a little bit of that.
John Weir said, Gergiev, your silence is killing Russian gays. I said, Valery, feeling closer to him after our yelling at him at the Metropolitan Opera, I said, Valery, your silence is killing Russian gays. We were escorted out.
There's a lot of security.
Here we are. There was a lot of security. So
They threatened arrest.
they did threaten arrest, but in the end, the police are not willing to make an arrest. So.
And when was this? When?
The very beginning?
Or what?
Well, I'm sorry, when the arrest was threatened?
When did you yell?
When did you yell?
Oh,
Before
it was,
the show?
the orchestra comes out, they tune, Gergiev comes out, he takes a little bow, there's a round of applause with him. John Weir started right after that applause finished. As soon as John was done, I started.
Okay, so what was the audience reaction?
When John first started chanting, he got applause.
He did get
Apparently
applause.
they appreciated his sentiment in those
Yay!
in the chant.
And he was on
Those
too.
people didn't get up and leave, but they did applaud what he was doing. Then, as my chanting continued, there were more boos, but there was also some applause and cheering as well.
How did Gergiev react?
He didn't turn around. He just sort of sat there, sort of looking.
Sat there or stood there?
Well, stood there. Excuse me. Obviously, I see him from some distance, but his head bowed as he was looking at the music in front of him on the stand.
But you did delay the start of the concert.
By
right?
about 2 or 3 minutes, sure.
Right.
How did you get in?
Tickets.
Bought a ticket.
Bought a ticket.
An amazing thing called the
Practice. Yeah.
Right, so I should say, by the way, I should say, in less than 3 weeks, I've had a debut at Metropolitan Opera.
That's right.
Yay! Thank you!
At Metropolitan Opera, my partner here, Ken Kidd, also had his debut.
That's right.
How were you selected to get in?
You know, whoever
You have an affinity group?
raised their hand got to go in and get it.
Oh, really?
And whoever raised
That's enough. Great. Congratulations, guys.
It's a lot of fun, and it means a lot
we may
because
have
it really makes an impression on the people who see it. We talked to a lot of people outside Carnegie Hall who were supportive. The Russians are certainly aware of this and are responding.
I got the
various
finger
ways.
from a couple of people I was yelling at going in. We may have to protest the United Kingdom, where gays and lesbians seeking asylum are being asked to prove their sexuality with photographic and video evidence of highly personal sexual activity. The group Stonewall called that distressing. And in Australia, the new leader of the opposition in the Senate is an out lesbian, Penny Wong.
Okay, AIDS news. Well, Logo, the formerly gay TV network, is advertising for casting for an HIV awareness public service announcement. They want guys 22 to 45 with cool jobs. And to apply, you don't have to disclose your HIV status, but you have to send a headshot and a body shot.
Outrageous.
Yeah.
A little note on Obamacare, which still exists. If you're uninsured, you have until December 15th to enroll. Coverage begins January 1st. The Human Rights Campaign says that if you're living with HIV, consider that not every state AIDS drug assistance plan will be able to cover health reform plans. So check with your state. Two, medications. Make sure yours are covered by the plan you choose, and providers, make sure yours are covered by the plan that you choose. Go to HIVhealthreform.org for more information.
A new report has looked at the effect of prevention and treatment worldwide and has found that there are about a dozen countries where they've reached what they call a tipping point, which means they're putting more people on treatment than are getting newly infected. Rwanda, Botswana, and several other African countries are now in the good column, along with Haiti and South Africa. Nigeria is doing the worst, and India is bad too. But this is the formula they're now constructing. It's interesting. And there's a new movie opening soon, November 1st. Dallas Buyers Club. We were going to show you a clip, but we don't have time.
You can
for
go
that.
online, go Google Dallas Buyers Club. You can watch. This is
You
with
can see it
Matthew
on
McConaughey.
YouTube, yeah.
This is about Ron Woodruff, who was a PWA cowboy essentially, and it's about his fight to get drugs to other PWAs. It stars him and Jared Leto.
Matthew McConaughey as
as Ron.
Yeah.
Jared Leto as a transgender woman who helps him.
This is about smuggling drugs in from Mexico that are approved drugs but not approved for AIDS, and this was before ACT UP.
1986. They're both getting Oscar buzz for the roles.
Dallas Buyers Club is the name of the movie. We haven't seen it, so we can't recommend it, but it sounds interesting. A couple other movies. God Loves Uganda is playing now in New York at the Bowtie Cinema in Chelsea, opening soon in LA, DC, Nashville, Seattle, San Francisco, other places. Our friend Shep saw it and said it was good but scary. It's the thing about, the Kill the Gays bill in Uganda, and the Americans are going over there to promote it.
We're doing shows. I saw, there's a Romeo and Juliet on Broadway, which isn't good. Now there's one at the Classic Stage Company, which I like very much, but it's also not great. Instead of star-crossed lovers, we get miscast ones. But the people who play the adults are terrific. We got a picture. Daphne Rubin-Vega from Rent as the nurse is wonderful, and Daniel Davis as Friar Lawrence, and David Garrison as Capulet are good.
And Blue is the Warmest Color. The Cannes-winning lesbian film opens in New York and San Francisco this weekend. I saw it. I'm not interested in 17-year-old sex.
And
I'm not.
And congratulations
We're done.
to Tammy Baldwin, the Senate's first Golden Gavel Award.
Okay. See you next week.